These are some images of a visit to Ukraine by actor and humanitarian Liev Schreiber. That building is a bombed-out school in a village west of the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Schreiber has been an advocate for the Ukrainian people, especially children, since Russia's invasion. He co-founded BlueCheck Ukraine, which raises funds for NGOs on the ground delivering aid to Ukrainians. Now, on one of his visits to the country, he met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And last month, Schreiber addressed the UN Security Council about the plight of Ukraine's children, especially the thousands of kids taken from their families or orphanages and sent to Russia. These grim numbers are from Ukraine's national police data. Hundreds of children have been killed, wounded, or have just vanished after more than 2 years of war. Ukraine says nearly 20,000 children have been deported or forcibly removed from their home territory. And Liev Schreiber joins us now from New York. Mr. Schreiber, the numbers we just spoke of, they are stark. They paint a grim picture, certainly, of captured children, abducted children, sometimes of orphaned children. Can you talk to us about your efforts to give these children, these Ukrainian children, a voice?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Addie. You know, we may have political differences in this country, but one thing we can apparently all agree on is that the illegal abduction and deportation of children, Ukrainian children out of Ukraine into Russian-held territories or Russia itself is something that, as an international community, we really need to address. And thanks to the work spearheaded by your Minister of Foreign Affairs, Melanie Joly, and the Ukrainian ministers, we're making a lot of progress on this. And I'm very grateful to the American administration. The State Department joined this coalition on the 9th, and I believe on Tuesday, they created a document that would increase our ability to prosecute these war crimes. My organization, BlueCheck, we basically fund local aid, boots on the ground organizations inside Ukraine that help these children with mental health issues, shelter issues, food issues. So right now, especially with all of the aid being held up from the U.S. right now, hopefully that will get resolved within the next 3 or 4, 2 days, really. They have before they break for the holidays, and then we're probably going to have to wait till April if we don't hear anything. So it's really more urgent than ever that we keep providing humanitarian aid and backing up the Ukrainians as much as we can in this time of need.
You just mentioned that $60 million package that's stalled in Congress right now. You know, some do worry that the support out of Washington may wane and potentially drop off altogether come January with potentially a new president. What do you say to those people in your country who oppose sending further aid to help Ukrainians?
Well, you know, I think we all recognize that this is something that we're going to have to deal with now or later. It's going to be much more expensive later. BlueCheck really is just we provide humanitarian aid and localized aid. And it's, so we try to stay neutral on the political end, but personally, I think that for any democracy-loving people, this is a very, very important issue. It's better that we support the Ukrainians now than deal with what's coming down the road. The ISW announced recently that they believe that Russia is gearing up for a confrontation with NATO, and I think that it's important that we all take a long, hard look at this and decide where we stand.
And when we're talking about those numbers, again, they're not just numbers. These are children, real children with real names, with real families. As I mentioned off the top there, last month you spoke at the UN Security Council and 3 rescued Ukrainian children were with you recounting what they had gone through after being abducted by Russian forces. Can you share with us what they talked to you about and what they told you?
I think the most moving story for me was a boy named Sasha, who his father was killed in the war, and his mother has been officially listed as missing for 2 years now. And at one point, one of the people at the UN Council asked Sasha if he could say anything, if the whole world were listening and he could say anything to them, what would he say? And it was one of those moments where I was convinced that Sasha was going to say something political or something that had been prepared or handed to him. And just the pragmatism of a child that he said, well, if the whole world were listening, I would ask them to help me find my mother. And that just really struck home for me in terms of what these children are facing, what these children are dealing with. And I'm so grateful to Sasha's grandparents who didn't give up and tracked him down and found him and brought him home. But that, I think, it's one thing that we can all agree on, that treating children in this way is just unacceptable.
You talked about Sasha. One of the other children was Ilya. He is now an orphan. Both of his parents were killed in Mariupol. I know that you lost your father as well, and some of us who've lost a parent know what it's like to no longer have the person that's always been there. What has it been like for you to listen to these stories? Obviously, they're going through added layers of trauma, being in a war zone and also being abducted, and then the process, a very complicated process of being returned to their country. Talk to us a little bit about how you felt listening to those stories.
Well, for me, it just highlighted the need to continue to provide humanitarian aid, particularly to some of our partners like Save Ukraine, Spivdia. These are the organizations that are the landing places for these abducted children, that are taking care of these kids, that are actually initiating the rescue operations. So, you know, even if our governments can't agree on sharing the burden in this fight for democracy, certainly we as a civil sector can support the humanitarian needs of these children and these people. And that's the work that BlueCheck, Builders Ukraine, and United 24 is struggling to do.
Now, in February, at a conference in Riga on this very issue, a child psychologist spoke with our team, the CBC News team, about the brainwashing that some young children faced. Let's have a quick listen to it together, and then I'll get your thoughts on it.
Sure.
They said to them that nobody needs you, your parents don't need you, your country don't need you anymore, and they tried to erase any identity, not just Ukrainian nation, but also to family.
Liev, you've heard similar stories about this type of psychological warfare, essentially. We know that Amnesty International calls this an eradication of Ukrainian culture, identity, and language. I want to ask you, as someone with Ukrainian roots who now lives in America, how does this make you feel?
It makes me feel horrible that it's happening to children. It's bad enough that this is part of Putin's strategy, which is to eradicate Ukrainian culture and ultimately Ukrainian lives. It's bad enough that the language is forbidden. It's bad enough that the culture is forbidden. But to do this to children, to abduct children and to try and indoctrinate them. One of the other great stories is there was a little boy, Ilya, who was indoctrinated into one of these, and because he had such terrible injuries to his leg, he was in a Russian hospital, and he couldn't stop saying to the doctors there, glory to Ukraine, or Slava Ukraini. And the doctors were trying to explain to him that he shouldn't say that anymore. And they were trying to teach him how to say glory to the state that is now a part of Russia. And listening to Ilya talk about that was, even for such a young kid, his bravery and his resilience and his spirit to push back was inspiring and encouraging, because I think that's what we're dealing with when we're dealing with the average Ukrainian, is a tremendous amount of resilience and strength and courage.
Yeah, talk to us about that resilience and courage, because we basically saw that from day one of the wider scale invasion. People going up and standing in front of tanks and asking the soldiers what they were doing there. There were these older women who said, put these sunflower seeds in your pockets so that when you die here, flowers will bloom. So we saw that again from the first day, and now more than 2 years into this war, you're witnessing this resilience from children. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I should add that my grandparents and great-grandparents were Ukrainian and Polish immigrants. I am American. But one thing that I noticed in all of my trips to Ukraine is that this is a very, very resilient and strong culture. It is, in many ways, a warrior culture, and they are committed to this fight. And it's part of the reason I believe that ultimately they will win it, because they have that spirit and they have that sense of their place, their gratitude for the journey that they've been on, and their desire for a free and democratic society, for that thing that we have and that we all long for, which is self-sovereign, self-governance. And they've been fighting for it for a long time, in a very acute fight over the past 2 years. And there is some weariness, and there is some exhaustion, and there is some sorrow. But the Ukrainians are the last people on earth to quit. And I just hope that my own government in particular can understand the importance of this and the shared values that we have, both with the Canadian government and with the Ukrainian government, that these values are what make us great. And these shared values are extremely important to defend right now.
You've written about the rights, the freedoms, the security that some of us in the Western world have inherited that we've never really had to fight for, and watching Ukrainians fight for that now. I do also want to ask you, you've been talking to the Ukrainian children who've been rescued. You've heard their stories. What's it like for you to talk about this with your own children?
Well, it's part of the reason that I'm doing all of this, is so that my own children understand that my patriotism and my sense of myself as an American has to do with stuff like this, that my grandparents and their great-grandparents have created these opportunities for us by caring about these shared values, by caring about finding opportunities for their children and working hard to make sure that I would be able to, for instance, be able to sit here and talk to you on this Zoom. That is a product of my grandparents' generation and the wars that they fought on my behalf. And I think that we need to remind our children and ourselves that our democracy is something that we have to respect, take care of, and maintain. And it involves sometimes more than just voting. It involves being active and speaking up for the liberties that matter to us. And hopefully that's what provides, that's what creates the environment that we want for our children and our children's children.
Thank you very much for taking the time today to speak about the work that your organization, BlueCheck Ukraine, is doing, and for providing more insights into some of the stories that the Ukrainian children have shared with you. Actor, humanitarian Liev Schreiber speaking to us from New York. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.